yeah, I'm recording this with my phone. I didn't have enough time to set up for this, but yeah, this will do. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Paul Schauder. He is an amazing creative and leader. He has experience and has worked in huge agencies like Hill Holiday, Arnold, and Mullen. And then he transitioned to the tech world and worked at companies like LogMeIn, Circle, and then most recently at Alyce, where we worked together, and it was awesome. He's one of the most like creative people I've ever met. He can come up with concepts in seconds, and we had an amazing conversation about like how the world of B2B and tech and SaaS is evolving and branding, in terms of branding and all that. So I hope you enjoy it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, let's just go for it, and let's I want you to start introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your experience, and see how it goes from there.
Sure. Okay. So my name's Paul Schauder. I'm a creative director. I've worked both on the agency side for a number of years and on the client side for a number of years, mostly in tech, pretty much all in tech. On the client side, I started my career a long time ago at Mullen Advertising as a media planner, actually. So this is almost pre-internet, really. So I was doing buying and planning for traditional media. But I worked at Mullen, and if you don't know Mullen, it was a hot creative shop at the time. We had just won BMW, and you know, the brand and building the brand and creating great creative was what we were all about. And I've had the pleasure to work there, Hill Holiday and Arnold. So three of the biggest agencies in the Boston area, but also three of the biggest agencies in the country. And we had a saying at Arnold, which was that great work works. And what we meant by that is if it's a piece of creative that is emotionally resonant and lands with the customer based on some sort of insight that we have to their behavior or their needs, that it would be stimulating and that it would lead to sales. And so I was kind of steeped in this, in and fortunate enough to work for a bunch of really smart people who taught me how to do branding and who cared about the work. And if you've ever worked at an agency before, before I went to the technology side, I'd never eaten dinner with my family. We worked all hours of the night every weekend. Either we were pitching or not pitching. But the product at an advertising agency is creative. And I would say the difference between my experience at an agency where I was a group creative director at Arnold running the retail businesses, Royal Caribbean, RadioShack, and Babies R Us before I crossed over to the client side with LogMeIn, is that, again, like at an agency, everything is geared toward making great creative. That's the product we make and sell. And everything in the agency is supportive of that process. Then you go to a client and you work at a products company like LogMeIn or Alyce, where you work and I have recently worked, or True Motion, where I've worked, and the product is the product, right? The product is the thing we make. That's the star, and the creative responsibility is to support the growth and acceleration of that. But the whole company is geared toward making that successful.
And do you think like, or like maybe like this is more like case by case, but do you think like what has been like the biggest like switch in terms, like when you go from trying to like sell like direct to consumer products, that it's like a broader like audience, to like when you go to like something a bit more niche, like do you think like the approach to creativity is the same, or like, or it's like a thing that like you analyze it in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are nuances in the differences between, say, B2B selling and B2C selling. Like, I mean, if you're trying to sell, I used to work on the Dunkin' Donuts campaign, right? If you're selling coffee and a donut, you're trying to create a whimsical kind of slice of life piece of creative that someone will relate to, and just have that instant memory in their mind when they're driving down the street and they see those pink and orange letters. It's slightly different when you're selling big pieces of software, like $100,000 products. The more zeros, the more, I would say, the more backup you need to get someone to make this, like we're talking about a $350 cup of coffee and a donut. It's not that hard of a purchase. When I'm going to put my company's resources to work, I need to be more secure that this thing is ticking all the boxes. Unfortunately, what that tends to do in the tech world is lead people down into this feature function fight.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you end up making yourself a commodity, and the only commodity that wins is the low price commodity. So if you don't have a business model that makes you the lowest priced option in the market, then you're going to lose 9 times out of 10 in any kind of bake-off, because you're not elevating the conversation to something that's interesting or exciting. So Simon Sinek has said you should sell the why, and we talked at Arnold about creating categories of one, and category creation is a huge movement in the industry right now. But really, you're trying to find a differentiated positioning that isn't related to feeds and speeds. You know what I mean? It's related to need and benefit.
So once you transition to tech, right? Like there's like you said, like there's like a bunch of nuances in what the industry represents and does. So
Yeah,
you went from agency, you joined LogMeIn, that is a huge
that's
company
right.
in Boston.
Yeah.
So like what was the thought behind you joining a company like that, right? Because like it's not, or maybe it's a bit more common now, but I don't think it was like a common thing then of bringing somebody with like that kind of background to like a very like analytic mindset kind of like environment that tech companies are.
Yeah. I mean, a kind of a cheeky answer is that I'm a Gemini, right? So I have two sides to my personality. I have a very creative side and a very analytical side. And I like data. I get geeky about that stuff.
Yeah.
From everything, like just watching soccer and seeing how long the players are on the field, to how many touches they get, to what parts of the field they're in, just even that kind of data I'm super excited about. So, so I never had a problem with it from that perspective. I mean, I left Holiday to go to a startup called Brain Gem, which was in South Boston when South Boston was not that hip, it was still Whitey's territory at the time. And so it was, it wasn't a great place to be, but we were trying to marry marketing to tech. It was a little early. We succumbed to the .com blow up era in 2000. And, when I left Arnold, it was again 2008-9 when we had the Great Recession, and I was freelancing. I took 20 hours a week at LogMeIn because it was stable, and I didn't really care too much about the business, to be honest with you. I was just doing what they asked me to do, write banners, make product videos, whatever. And they liked what I was doing. I mean, it was more clever than what they had been used to. It was more graphic. I took my skill set from the agency and applied it to their product. And, then one day they asked me, we want to change the homepage to our website. And this was when LogMeIn was about 70 million. And we really sold just 2 products, LogMeIn, Free and Pro, which are 2 variants of the same product, and LogMeIn Rescue. And they asked me, what should we put on the homepage? And I said, I don't know. What do you want to tell the world about yourself? And they said, we don't know. And I said, well, then I recommend that we put bunnies there. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, yeah, just a nice picture of cute bunnies. And they thought I had 2 heads, But they said, why would you do that? And I said, well, if you don't know what you want to tell the world, at least someone who shows up will get a smile and they're non-threatening, right? So it led into a bigger conversation of like, what should this brand stand for, and what should it be in the world, and why don't we even know what we are? And that was when the conversation turned from being a freelancer to a full-timer. And they said, would you want to come on and help us figure that out? What is our purpose? Because frankly, they had a product and they were selling it,
Yeah.
and that was about and it took them all the way to public. I mean, they were 70 million in revenue. They'd already gone IPO. So they weren't doing badly and they were doing great, but it was really just it was a tool kind of set problem. You know what I mean? Like they had a tool that other people didn't have. It worked better than other people, and they pioneered the freemium, the freemium model. But I used to say to them, like, look, if it's free and I don't need it, it doesn't matter, right? Like, I drive by free stuff on the side of the road all the time, like old mattresses and, bad furniture. And it's like, I don't put it in my car just because it's free. I don't need it. And I think it's junk, and a lot of times telegraphing free is that it's not worth money, right? So.
And so you went, well, you were there for like 8 years, right? And
yeah, 7.5. Yeah.
So you went from like, freelance and then full time, and you went from like a decently sized company to a huge
company. Yeah.
So it was like your first transition was agency to this.
Yeah.
You went from like you went through like the whole thing, and then you like jumped back to like where were you next? You went to Circle next, right? Or
I went to True Motion for a year on contract, but I mean, let me back up on LogMeIn for a minute though. When I was hired, the guy who hired me, who's now the COO of Rapid7, his name's Andrew Burton. And really Mike Simon hired me, but Andrew was my sponsor at the company and said we should get this guy. And I can't close him. Mike, can you close him? He wants to go back to advertising. How can we convince him to stay? Part of it was that, we were a growing business, and I had been in advertising for a number of years where we had May and October layoffs every year for 3 years running. And this company, they were like, can you hire anyone? Who can you bring in? Bring them in as fast as you can. We're growing like weeds. So it felt good to win, to be winning and to be growing. The second part was at the agency, you're not always going to prosper from your labor like you are at a tech company, right? You get equity shares. And so if you believe in what you're able to accomplish, you can then prosper from that. And so I firmly believe that my skill set was going to help this company grow, and it grew from 70 million in rev to $1 billion in rev during my time there. And we added a bunch of companies. We brought some in, but so, it was a pretty good and easy transition to make. And then I surrounded myself with other creatives. One of the jokes was that every time I came to work, I had another person from Arnold in my backpack. I hired art directors, I hired writers, I hired at the time, Flash designers and developers. And, so it was, I quickly built up a team, and then we introduced the UI UX discipline to the organization. But we had a broad mandate. We didn't just do like banners and emails and nurture flows and stuff. We also helped with product design. We helped develop products from the ground up, from naming. It was a really great place to work, and it was a lot of fun. It was super adventurous. But the guy who hired me, Andrew Burton, said, it's going to be an interesting experiment. Are you going to become more like us, or are we going to become more like you? And, because frankly, one of the sticking points was Mike Simon basically, laid out an option for me, or gave me an offer and said, is that motivating to you? And I said, I don't know, Mike, the first warm day of the year, and this is back in 2010. So before things had really gotten, relaxed and in the tech world, everyone was still wearing, blue shirts tucked into khakis with a phone on their belt, and he said, like, would this close the deal? And I said, I don't know, Mike, the first warm day of the year, I'm going to show up in shorts and flip flops. Is that okay? And he was like, why aren't we wearing shorts? We should all wear shorts,
I think at some point I told you this, but when I was a kid, my dad used to work for HBO.
Right.
And I remember the first time I was a kid, like I was like 6 or 7, I went to the office. So back home, HBO Latin America owned like this building, and they had like 6 or 7 TV channels.
Yeah.
And everybody would be like, just like wearing whatever. It was just like the most laid back environment that I've seen in my life, especially like in a very conservative country like Venezuela. And I remember telling my dad, it's like, I'm never wearing a suit for work ever
Yeah, exactly.
after seeing that. And
Yeah.
so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I kind of designed my own life to make sure that I didn't have to do that as well. You know, I didn't. The irony is that I wanted, you know, I started to see creativity in places I didn't think it existed. You know, like if you're, you know, I thought Wall Street was a bunch of jackknives, you know, who are greed heads or whatever. But when you can look out and say this company has the ability to transform the way people live, so I'm going to invest in it today, you know, to see, you know, 10 years from now what the transformation in the world is going to be. And that's why the tech industry is so exciting, is because you're working with small companies that have an idea, people who see the vision for it, put the funding in, and then something interesting can really happen. Now, the problem is a lot of the work that's done is not very interesting. So you have these cool ideas with these visionary people, and then they, you know, they present it on a platter like it's, you know, a dead fish. You know, it's just not, they're not doing anything to be amazing, you know, in their marketing.
So going through that point a little bit, like what I mean, because like it's true. I think also like of course in my way shorter experience in the industry compared to yours, but like I think I have seen like a few stages of like how stuff has been. But like what do you think at this present day that there's been like a lot of evolution in terms of like branding and creative? What do you think it's like the next step, or like the thing that like the industry is lacking? Like what do you think it's going to be like the next step of evolution compared to like consumer brands, or like that it's kind of, it's been like the industry that has influenced a little bit more of like what branding has been for
Yeah.
most of the time, the longest.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, you know, and again, I'm influenced by the types of companies I work for, you know. So if I worked for Apple, I'd have a very different conversation with you because, you know, go ahead and tell me what Apple's social strategy is, because I don't think it exists.
Yeah.
You know, I have on the desk that I'm sitting at, I have 3 Apple products.
Yeah.
All my kids have Apple products. We have iPods. We have another one of these computers, 2 more in the garage, you know, another one upstairs. So in this house, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 laptops, 2 desktops, and each of us have a phone.
Yeah.
Right. And I've never received an email from Apple other than to say my cloud, you know, storage is renewed and I'm getting billed $2.99 or whatever it is for more storage than I'm ever going to use. Right. So they don't reach out to me. They don't nurture me. You know, their whole strategy is really based on television outdoor, and they're the largest technology company in the world. Maybe Amazon is up there these days, but Amazon is one of the biggest traditional advertisers in the world. Google is one of the biggest traditional advertisers in the world. Now you're starting to see other companies follow that lead. You know what I mean? So I think, you know, Bird Dogs,
Yeah.
you know, it's largely a technology company. If you think about it, the way that it attacked the market, it was a social first strategy, used a lot of LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram stuff. And now I'm seeing television commercials. You know, you get to a certain point where you grow into this. And there used to be an old maxim that the medium is the message. And really what that meant is the important companies are going to spend money on television right now. I don't think companies like that we were working for, Alyce or Privy or, you know, Drift or HubSpot, are really going to get to the point where they put money on television, but they are going to be starting to use video, I think, in a more less explanatory and more aspirational way, you know, because, you know, all of those companies stand for a particular thing, and, but they talk a lot about the product and not the purpose, you know, even so, do you know what I mean? So, like, you know, I admire them all for what they've done. But, you know, you could see Drift, which I think had an amazing strategy, and you've worked there and you know it better than I do, but you could easily see them making some sort of social statement that, you know, because they're led by 2 people of color, they could do something that's not about growing Drift, but about impacting the culture and becoming something bigger than themselves by embracing it. But they've yet to do it, you know, and I don't know why. To me, that's a completely missed opportunity, right?
Yeah,
Especially since our industry is not that diverse, you know what I mean? So
that's what I was gonna say a bit. Like I think is I think it's also like depends on a few things, right? Like because like a few of these companies you have mentioned, it like I think the key aspect of all those companies is they have leaders that believe in branding
yeah,
and
absolutely.
the philosophy, like because like at Alyce, for example, we work together. It's like the whole philosophy behind like the personal experience thing, and then at Drift, it was like a lot about like the conversational marketing that how people
Yeah,
introduce
sure.
themselves to people. So
Yeah,
I think that's like that has I think that's the next step in like
yeah,
the industry as a whole, like leaders understanding the importance of brand
yeah,
and like the importance of like the philosophy of what they stand for, because like
yeah.
a software product honestly is boring. It's not like a thing that it's
Can be.
like for
Yeah,
everybody, right? But
yeah,
when there's like some sort of like philosophy attached to it for a specific reason,
yeah,
I think that's kind of like where a lot of companies are differentiating themselves, especially in the B2B software situation, because like
yeah, definitely.
if we think about, for example, Adobe, that it's like a company that makes this wide array of products,
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they need to try a bit harder to sell like the experience cloud compared to like the creative cloud, because the creative
yeah,
cloud pretty
yeah,
much sells itself.
yeah.
Um,
But at the same time, they had a great advertisement that they ran. So they made a switch over from being, you know, a company where you bought and installed software to becoming a SaaS. So the whole world is moving toward this cloud experience, and we have these born digital companies, and you know, but Adobe actually had to turn their business, and there was sort of a slough where they kind of went stale and their stock plummeted and everyone was worried about it. But since that time, it's been up and to the right at a 45-degree angle for
yeah,
about 5 years. But about 5 years ago, they also ran an ad called Click Baby that talked about marketing automation. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but you
massive.
know, it's a person looking at their dashboard and they're seeing a lot of interest on their website for a particular product, in this case encyclopedias, and the general manager sees it and calls up the supply chain and says we're
Oh, is that the
back,
one
and
from
then
the
yeah,
encyclopedias? Yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah, yeah, and
yeah.
then
Yeah, yeah.
everything, you see the whole chain, and they're, you know, they're
Yeah.
printing books and they're ordering
And it's
more
just the baby with like the
supplies,
yeah,
and then at the end it's just a baby clicking an iPad, you know. But it's really funny, and the point is you need to have transparency in your data in order to be a successful company. So that, you know, that point can be made creatively, right? And that hits home a lot harder than if you were to say to me, you know, our data analytics are the, you know, premier thing, you know, look at our 5, you know, features. I don't care. I can't remember that. I can remember the baby. I can't remember what you're trying to
that's
tell
what I
me.
was gonna say. Like and I said it like in the first video that I made for this thing, that it was creatives versus marketers, and I
Yeah,
feel sometimes like marketing, like market like people are like more specific with data and like analytics and all that stuff. I feel sometimes they miss the mark because they even forget that themselves, like they are human beings too, and like they
yeah,
appeal to like that kind of stuff. They don't appeal to like numbers too.
yeah. I
So
mean, I think, yeah,
it's
you
and,
know,
and
I agree with you.
and it's like that weird cycle, because like they are very centered in doing that kind of stuff, like data and selling through data and hitting the numbers, but at the same
Totally.
time like they forget like what really caused an impression in them, on them, like regardless of
Yeah,
what it is, right?
yeah. I think what's interesting is when I worked in the agency world, we had a ton of creativity and no data. We didn't know anything. I mean, we had anecdotal data, and we had, you know, focus groups, and we did testing of concepts, and but you know, you're doing 3 focus groups in Chicago filled with 10 people, and maybe you do 2 nights of that, so you end up seeing 60 people, and you're like, they all kind of like what we think we're going to do. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? And you've done some interviewing to figure out who the group is. And I believe in brand planning and brand research and finding out those sort of inferences. And I agree with all of that. and it helped us make great work because we found real insights into people's lives, right? So what is the insight on a B2B level of the buyer's need and benefits?
Yeah.
And it's, you know what I mean? And in a lot of ways, you're not necessarily selling a hammer. You're trying to, you know, this is an old chestnut, but you're trying to sell the hole in the wall that people want, right?
Yeah.
And that is best expressed in a creative way because you're trying to appeal to emotion, and emotion drives decision making more than people want to admit. You know, at LogMeIn, we didn't have a lot of money. We were competing against GoToMeeting and GoToMyPC a lot, and a bunch of others like WebEx, and we didn't have money. So what we talked about was not being B2B or B2C, but being B2H, talking to humans in a human and very relatable way, very approachable way. We didn't always have to be the superstar of our own, you know, of our own story. We could take, you know, liberties with our attitude and our language. We could allow ourselves to be the butt of the joke. You know, we did a lot of things that you would do for a direct consumer or B2C company, and it really clicked with people, you know, because the fact of the matter is you don't change when you walk through the front door of the office. And today we're not even going to offices. So, you know, you're not, I'm still Paul when I'm here. I'm still Paul when I'm sitting at my desk, and you're still Gons here and there, right? You don't become something different. There's a different about, like I said, the more zeros behind the deal, there's a deeper funnel of evaluation that needs to happen. And so you have to have the proper things to say, you know, sales enablement tools that show the ROI of your solution. But that's not why people like you or why they're even interested in dealing with you. You know, you and I've talked about this in the past, but you know, there's the Martech 8000 now. You know, when I started at LogMeIn,
every year is 1,000 more.
Yeah, exactly. And when I started at LogMeIn, there was no such thing. But what my point is, like, when I was in advertising, we didn't have data, so we were working off insights, and we were trying to create something that would resonate. Then I came to technology, and we had all this data, but the data was never actually really fed back to the creative team in order for us to get better at making stuff from the inferences that we learned. You know, if you do random A/B testing, and I've had people say to me, well, why not just make the website orange today and see if more people will click? It's like, well, because we're not orange. You know, some things have to be bedrock and we can test around it. But if we're not testing in a scientific manner, I don't know what I'm learning from it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There needs to be elements that are just kind of like true to the brand that,
yeah,
like, regardless of on any testing you do, it needs to be the way it is.
Yeah. And so in a agency setting, you'd have a brand planner or a research person going out to the market and finding insights amongst consumers. In a tech situation, you have a product marketer going out to your customers and doing interviews and trying to talk to them and sitting in on gongs and gong.ios. And they did a great job. Like Gong did a big outdoor campaign in San Francisco for their own sales reps, you know. What does that do beyond, it's not really selling Gong product, it's selling Gong culture, right? And they've gone crazy, you know, and they use video in a very low production environment to create a personality for their brand and around their brand that gives them what I was going to say about being at LogMeIn is they've created for themselves an emotional moat around their product that makes me like them, want to work with them, and put them on the list. Out of the 8,000, I have to choose 3 to talk to because I can't spend time with 8,000.
One similar anecdote that I think about like this, that kind of stuff is, well, Wistia, that it's Boston-based company. Like,
yeah, they're great guys. Yeah,
they're awesome. And when they did their documentary series, 110, 100, I think, I remember.
Yeah, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000.
So they like they released it on like Amazon Video and all that stuff. But like they first did like a movie theater premiere.
Yeah.
And I remember I went, and it was like a movie, right? And when I got up, I remember I said to the people that I was with, that it's like, it's so crazy that we were just watching a movie that was produced by a software company and we didn't get bored.
Yeah, totally.
Like
Yeah,
we watched like an hour
exactly.
and 20 minutes of this thing, and we were like entertained.
Yeah, but they weren't heavy-handed, right? They were just saying, here's what you can do with the different amounts of money. And it was educational way, but it was interesting entertainment in a
Yeah,
way.
and he had jokes, and he had like,
Yeah, right. It has a lot of personality, you know.
and that's a cool thing. I think all the like the industry is just trying to find these ways of that, like of showing that software can be fun in a way.
Well, yeah. I mean, even look at product design over the last, I would say, 10 years. I would like to credit myself, my team, and LogMeIn for helping do that. But when we created Join Me, there wasn't a product like it in the marketplace. I mean, we built the website with, very cheeky headlines. It was
Yeah,
a full page of image, which no one was doing at the time. We only had two buttons on it: start or join a meeting. It had a funny headline, and that was it. I mean,
yeah,
the whole website was 4 pages, 5 pages deep, and we took off like a rocket. The product was great, right? But the promise met the product, right? And
yeah,
so those two things happened, but we kind of changed it. We weren't formal at all. You know what I mean? Like we
yeah. You
called them.
you were true to who you were, right? Like,
Yeah, but we wanted the product to be human too, right? It was super easy to use. It was organic shapes. It was 5 buttons. There was nothing that you didn't need to use. There was all, like in terms of like music, it was
yeah,
all filler. It was all killer, no filler. You know what I mean? And then we had a ton of fun with it, and we did a spot, that we shot at the agent at the office for no money with up and coming guys who wanted to direct. They were, DP out of Emerson, an editor who wanted to direct. The only person we paid money was the sound guy who was union. Everyone else was scale or, buyout contracts. And I think we had 7 million views on the ad because it was funny, and it also made a point, which was next time just use Join Me. Why bother going through the problems of having a meeting?
yeah. That thing with the software is funny because I always think about like Salesforce, for example, that is
Mm-hmm.
like one of the ugliest softwares that I've seen because it's like,
Yeah, it's terrible.
but it's like, but if they change like like something, like people would just like lose it. And
Yeah,
that's a hilarious example, like how
yeah,
like, okay, there's like stuff that needs to be updated and modern, but like there's
yeah.
stuff that just needs to go back and stay the way.
Well, yeah, I would say Marketo is that way too, right?
There's that.
Marketo interface is just, it's pathetic, really. And it's funny because it's an Adobe company now, and Adobe's, a design leading company,
Yeah,
and Marketo is just really not very good from an interface standpoint, but it does its
but
job
it
really
works,
well, and
right?
everyone knows where every button is, so
Yeah,
you can't move it, because if you move it, you interfere with their way of working, right?
yeah. I mean,
So
and it's also like they have so many users that like
yeah,
just like rolling out like it's like when literally you're like on YouTube and they're like, do you want to update to the new YouTube, or you want to stay with?
yeah.
You're like, yeah, I'm staying with the old
I'll
thing.
stay with what I know.
I'm not
Yeah,
willing to
exactly.
learn.
Yeah, but I mean, like, Slack came out. It's funny. When I was working at again at LogMeIn, and we had developed Join Me and a couple other apps in that same vernacular, and saying, Cubby was one and AppGuru was one, and they didn't quite take off. We didn't really support them as business, um, but Slack came out, and if you got a 404 at Slack, it was a funny little message.
Yeah,
And so people turned around and said, hey, we should do funny 404s. And I was like, hey, we've been doing funny 404s for 2 or 3 years now. I guess you just haven't seen it. If you get a 404, it's pretty funny. You know
yeah.
what I mean? I think ours said like, some things don't exist, like fairies and this page, you know what I mean? And it's just a kind of a cute statement. And we did that throughout the website. We had legal copy that had jokes in it. You know what I mean? So it was like, the whole point of it was to give the product a personality that could be happy and fun and useful and become friendly to you. So again, like, there were probably other tools that were better or more capable than ours, but people just liked working with us. They just liked our product because it spoke to them. And I think that's where there's been a sort of a rift in the like when I was at join me, it was like, oh, you're a creative guy. What color should the carpet be? You know, what color should we which color should the walls be? You know, oh, we need to pick out chairs. You're probably more qualified than I am, you know, as you know, with a design eye or whatever. But also it was like, hey, we're going to redesign this product, or we're going to launch this product. How should it work? What should it look like? You know, you're the one who has a vision for that kind of stuff. So we were very well integrated into the product teams. I think since that time, there's been a little bit of a distance between creative and product. Like Slack is clearly a product created by people who had it in mind to make the product sell itself by being a personable product, you know, and there's others out there that do that really well, you know, but I think that discipline needs to be injected into the product development just as much as on the backward facing, you know, customer facing communication, you know. So I mean, I think what you said, which is, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but I think what you said is interesting, is really not marketers versus creatives. It's marketers and creatives working together. Product marketers finding insights, giving them to creatives making materials off of that, giving it to the automation team running that stuff, feeding back information into the system, so that it's this closed loop flywheel that says, that didn't work, this did, let's see why that worked, let's see who this worked for, why it worked, and then trying and iterating on that to keep getting better and better and better. So, you know, I mean, I think that there's a great opportunity for the marketing team to be fully integrated with the creative team, and so that the creative team is brought in and not just making paint, you know, but being an integral part of the product, you know, and the marketing strategy. How are you going to use creative to separate yourself, just the same way that you're going to use a new feature, or, you know, better customer service, or, you know, at Alyce, great salespeople, whatever, right? So
it's funny because I was gonna ask you for like a closing statement, but that was pretty much the closing statement that I needed.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can aspire to do more. You know what I mean? And even if, like, a lot of times the things, like a great Nike ad back in the day. So there's this whole kind of fight between content. Sorry, I guess I am.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
I'm going to reclose.
Go for it.
But there's whole fight between content and creativity, right? And it was like, why are you doing marketing when you should be doing impactful content? But there's a Nike ad that ran back in the day, which is called "If You Let Me Play," and it's about how sports impact women in their lives if they're involved in sports as children. So, you know, one of the lines is like, if I play, if you let me play, I'll be 80% more likely to leave a man who hits me. You know what I mean? Like, so that's information that was found through surveys and social sciences and stuff. So that's content, right? You could have written a long piece and put it up on Medium, but it was more impactful to see that line delivered by a 6-year-old girl or an 8-year-old girl on a swing set, right? But the line between what is content and what is marketing and what is creative is super blurred. And the best stuff is a combination of all three of those things, because that's the most important. And like I said, the companies that I think could do really well in that world in Boston and other parts of the tech community just aren't really seeing how you can turn information into a piece that has more power because of the way that it's delivered. And then that power doesn't have, you know, like If You Let Me Play is not about our newest best sneaker with, you know, 32% more lacing or whatever, or a better fit. It's about the impact of sport and Nike's delivery of sport to people. And so if you're delivering, I don't know, conversational marketing to companies, what is that impact and how does that change their trajectory? You know what I mean? So if they're going to be this small company, now they're going to be this giant company, tell that story. You'd get a whole bunch more customers than you are now. You know what I mean? So, and they're still doing really well. So it's just the opportunity to be stratospheric. You know what I mean? So, but that's where I'm at.
That's awesome. No, Paul,
Right.
thank you so much for
Yeah, thank you, Gons.
doing this, man. I love. There's like a couple amazing phrases that I have in my mind now that I'm not.
Yeah.
But really.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful. Yeah, no, I mean, look, I mean, you're on the front lines. You're doing great creative wherever you go, and part of what it's like, without the input, the proper insight, and the ability to play a little bit, it's just not going to be as good as it could be. It'll be great because you're good. You know what I mean? But it won't be stratospheric because you didn't get the time.
It could be.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's hard to sell a negative, sell a negative, but like prove a negative. You know what I mean? So, but thank you for inviting me. This is really a lot of fun. If I can be any other help too, let me know.
Thank you so much. Yeah.